Hi, everyone. We are so glad that you are here with us today for this program. While we wait for everyone to get settled into the room, why don't you say hi in the chat? Tell us your first name and what state you are joining us from. Getting settled in. Ooh, we have a parent. Welcome. Jonathan calling in from DC, Jordan in Missouri, Violet in California. Thank you all for being here today. Gabriella, California, terrific. Aaron in Maryland. Wow, we have people joining from all over the country. This is fantastic. Well, continue to please share your name and the state you're joining from, or if you're in the district. Hey, James, nice to see you. Um, we want to just say thank you so much for making the time to be here today, especially at the start of a very busy spring semester and cold spring semester, I'm sure, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Beth Francesco. I'm the executive director of the National Press Club Journalism Institute in Washington, D.C. So we are definitely digging our way out of the snow right now. We are the nonprofit affiliate, nonprofit organization affiliated with the National Press Club. Part of our work is creating programs and support specifically aimed at you, aspiring journalists, student journalists, active journalists who are interested in graduate studies. And we're so proud to be able to administer the National Press Club's scholarship program. This year, 2026, the club is going to be awarding more than $30,000 in scholarships during this summer and fall. And you're going to get some great insight today from two of the judges themselves, Erin Looney and Caitlin Mullaney. Erin and Caitlin have organized our dedicated group of scholarship judges, 25 people to be, in fact, for several years now. And the advice that they're going to share will not only help you with your National Press Club scholarship applications, but hopefully can give some insight for other opportunities you may be exploring, whether that's other scholarships, internships, job applications, other awards. So we've got some great insight coming your way this morning. So a couple of housekeeping items before we dive into those great tips. We are recording this program and we're going to send you the video in an email later today to the email you registered with. And we're also going to be putting together a great tip sheet that you can use throughout your application process. As you have questions, please feel free to to ask them in the webinar chat. So keep that chat function open, or you can use the Q&A queue, which allows you to pose questions anonymously if you'd like. We will answer questions as we go along, and we've saved some time at the end for anything that we didn't get to during the program. So here's the game plan. We're going to first go over the 6 scholarships offered by the National Press Club. If you have questions about eligibility, this is going to be a good time to ask those questions. Then we're going to get into dissecting 3 core areas of the application: the personal essay, work samples, and then we're going to tackle reference letters. We've got some great advice that we've prepared for you there. And again, ask questions along the way whenever it makes sense for you or when they occur to you. And then after that, we're going to open it up to any remaining questions that you may have. We hope that you won't be shy today. We are here for you to help you work through this application and feel the best and most confident that you can with what you put forward. No question is too big or too small to ask. You know that as a journalist. Again, pop those in the chat or the Q&A queue, and we'll make sure that we get to them as they come up. So let's get started. I'm going to stop talking so much soon, I promise, but let's get started with an overview of the scholarships that the National Press Club offers. My terrific colleague, Holly, who's working behind the scenes, is going to pull up slides so that we can kind of work through them. A couple of good things to know. The application deadline for all scholarships is March 1st. So make sure you've got that circled on your calendar. Put the reminder in your phone that March 1st is the final deadline for applications. Recipients are going to be notified in early May. So you'll notice that there's a little bit of a gap in there between application deadline and when recipients will be notified. That's to allow for the review of what we anticipate will be more than 400 applications for these opportunities. It's a lot to go through, so please be patient with us as we work through that process. And just so you're aware, funds are distributed in August, and applicants must be enrolled in college courses in fall 2026. So that's when this cycle covers, is the award will be distributed in fall 2026. We have 2 distinct opportunities for high school seniors who are graduating this May and will be going to school to their off to college in fall 26. And that is those two include the Scholarship for Journalism Diversity, honoring Julie Shu. This is a $5,000 award given to a high school senior graduating who demonstrates how they will bring diversity to American journalism. The award can be renewed for up to 3 years at $5,000 a year. So that brings this total to a $20,000 value on this award. It's highly coveted. So I would suggest that if you plan to apply for this, to definitely utilize the tips that Erin and Caitlin are going to share a little later. The other opportunity that we have for high school seniors who are graduating and attending school this fall, college this fall, is the Richard Zimmerman Scholarship. It's a one-time award of $5,000 to support a high school senior who's graduating and who wishes to pursue a career in journalism. This does not have the diversity designation on it the same way that the SHU Award does. So just something to note. We also have a broadcast-specific scholarship opportunity. The West Vernon Broadcast Scholarship supports diversity within the field of broadcast journalism. That's audio and visual, or visual, I should say. The scholarship is a $5,000 award given to a student who demonstrates a commitment to a career in broadcast journalism. This award is one that can be renewed for up to 3 years, which means that this value of this award is up to $20,000 over the course of 4 years. The scholarship is open to high school seniors and currently enrolled college students who demonstrate an interest, again, a commitment to a career in broadcast journalism. The review committee does give priority to students entering or enrolled in 2-year community colleges, although that's not a requirement. Those entering 4-year programs will also be considered. And then we also have 3 more scholarship opportunities. I'll get through them quickly. The Dennis and Shirley Feldman Fellowship is for someone who's interested in pursuing graduate studies in journalism. It's a one-time stipend of $5,000, and you must be enrolled in or in the process of applying for admission to an accredited graduate program in journalism in the U.S. I want to move on to a new opportunity that we have that is specific to sports writing journalism, sports journalism. The Rich Passon Sports Writing Scholarship is a $5,000 one-time award supporting undergraduate college juniors or seniors who demonstrate excellent and promise in sports journalism, sports writing. And this is a sports writing scholarship, so journalists will not select broadcast or other visual journalism entries for that award. It's brand new. We're very excited to have this opportunity available to you. And then finally, we're also excited about our Lewis Scholarship, which is the only summer scholarship that we award. This is a scholarship that supports a student journalist of color or from an underrepresented community. It provides free housing in Washington, D.C., as well as a $4,000 stipend to help that student intern in a Washington, D.C. newsroom over the summer. The qualifications for this is that you must be at least 18 years old, and you must secure your own news internship within DC. Couple of other quick notes. The GPA requirement for all of these is at least a 3.0 GPA, except for the Passon Sports Writing Scholarship, which does not have a GPA requirement. I'm going to pause there and just see if anybody has any questions about eligibility before we move on. You could also find all of these opportunities on our scholarship website, which I know Holly will share in the chat now. Okay, I don't see any questions on eligibility just yet, but if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to ask them. Let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in to the essay as we get into the portions of the application that I know we get a lot of questions on. Well, as we get started, I'm just wondering in the chat if you want to say, if you don't mind saying, what's the trickiest part of writing a personal essay? As you're doing that, I want to answer a question that Gabriella has posed. Is there only one scholarship for graduate students? Yes, the Feldman Scholarship is the only National Press Club scholarship available for graduate students. James, you have such a great point. Talking about yourself is the trickiest part of writing a personal essay. We're told not to write about ourselves or talk about ourselves. With that, let's go ahead and dive in to Erin and Caitlin's advice on the scholarships that we have available, and particularly the importance of the personal essay in the selection process. Caitlin, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I can get it started. I think when it comes to the personal essay, I do agree. When you're training to be a journalist or you are a journalist, the number one rule is, take yourself out of it. And where then we're asking the opposite of that. We're actually going full into the deep end on this. And what we ask, what really thrives with the personal statements is make it personal. I know I was in high school much further back than all of you, but the biggest thing is, you want to tie in journalism and diversity, and that's what we're asking. That's, what you think would be. But I found, at least in my experience with judging them, is what really thrives is just telling your own story. Something that the judges can read and connect and kind of just see who you are. I always joke that, you're always so tempted, and I was a big fan of this too, is like, like the definition of journalism and connecting that with yourself and things like that. But I always joke that all the judges are journalists, so they know what journalism is. So you don't have to worry about putting that in there. Just like dive past the like basic facts of the thing. And, we all want to be journalists. We know why, but tell your own story. And that's really what I think and what I've seen be successful with past judges.
So I agree completely, but I also use Sarah Seidner from CNN as my example for why you don't always have to be completely removed from the equation. I eschew that idea, eschew that idea, whatever. It's still early for me. Uh, Wholly being removed from the story is, again, not what we want to do here, but also not always the right move, even in practice. So it's kind of nice for this to be an opportunity to go outside the graded comfort zone that you've been living in as a student and maybe as a younger journalist. Sarah Seidner does this tremendous job. She battled breast cancer and she brings her story in to elevate other people's stories. It is never about her, but you do get to know her and you do get to know what she cares about and what matters to her and why she does the work she does. So if it helps to think of number one, this is not a slap you on the hand with a ruler kind of no thing. You can talk about more than just, I want to do this because I care about it and I'm passionate about it. You know what? Every one of you are passionate about it. That's not what you're telling us. You're telling us how you fit into this world in a way that's different from everyone else and does not, as Caitlin pointed out, does not define journalism. Again, we know that, you know that, we trust that you know that. So the key here is to elevate you and make yourself the story. But if it makes you feel more comfortable to make yourself the story as it relates to the field, go for that. I mean, I know that makes it a little bit more complicated to think about. Um, but I will tell you from experience, we elevate applications that either say, here's what I've been through, here's what I've done, for good or bad. You don't have to have been pinned under a car and have some dramatic story. You could have something very simple that is your pathway to where you are today. And that's going to get you a lot more attention than trying to say, I do not belong here. And again, it's not comfortable for everybody. Some people are very good at it. It is an opportunity, though, for you to try to say, if I were asked to do this, could I? And we know you can.
Yeah. Thank you both for those points. I do want to take a moment just to point out that each of the scholarship applications and opportunities are very distinct, and as such, they call for distinct essay responses. So I want to make sure that everybody on this call understands that if you write one essay, you haven't written an essay that necessarily will apply for each of the scholarships that we offer. For example, the Scholarship for Journalism Diversity honoring Julie Shu asks you to write a 500-word essay describing your interest in journalism and how you will bring diversity to U.S. journalism. Whereas the sports writing scholarship asks you to describe the first experience you had that made you want to be a sports writer and how you're pursuing the career. So you want to make sure you take the time to read those prompts and tailor your essay to the ask. Caitlin, you look like you were going to say something. I think it was probably along those lines.
Yeah, no, I said I definitely agree with the tailoring, but also just noting like it doesn't mean it has to be a completely different essay. I know it's like a very overwhelming time, but judges definitely can tell when something is not like unique to that a little bit, but just, your own personal flair. Also, can I just add something from before? I loved what Erin said about like bringing your own thing into it, and like it doesn't have to be like a dramatic story of what you've been through. Like you don't have to be like, I was trapped in a car, I was trapped in a snowstorm. It can literally just be your own like personal take on something to just show your personality of who you are. But
And
yeah.
humor will go far if you
Yes,
do it well.
Huber will go far. I said one of the most memorable essays I've ever read was a girl who like wrote all about like public sandwiches if you're from the South and you're familiar with
Pub
that.
subs.
Yeah, pub subs. It was so funny and it was just like a comparison to that and like different people and like melting pots, and I still remember that essay. I don't remember anything else
Yeah.
about the applicant, but I just remember the pub sub essay and I was like, that stuck with me for a while.
This
So I,
might not be the best jump off from that because it'll muddy, but I'm going to try to bring this back around to diversity. We also have to think about this when you are applying for the diversity scholarship, your diversity does not have to be, I check these boxes, therefore I'm going to elevate the industry. It can be, I'm going to elevate the voices of this diverse population I'm familiar with that I'm, a part of, or it can be, diversity goes beyond that box checking thing. Now, it doesn't go the whole way to pub subs necessarily. It can, but think a little more comprehensively about what you're going to do because everyone applying for that scholarship could easily say, I fit into this underrepresented group. I have been through these, identity related troubles. I've done this, I've done that. Why you and not them? That's what you're trying to set apart there.
Yeah, I think one way that we like to think about this, talking about the experiences that a journalist has had and translating it for an application, whether that's for a scholarship or for a job, is thinking about telling your own feature story, right? I mean, that's something that we can all understand is how to write a feature or a profile on someone else. And that can sometimes be a helpful framework when you're thinking about writing a personal essay or responding to a prompt, is that this is your opportunity to tell your story, and to be creative, show how you think about telling and constructing stories. It's just another way to think about it as a writing sample that showcases your skills. I do,
Something,
oh,
oh,
so
sorry, one
go ahead.
last thing. Something I often tell my students to do that can be helpful if you're comfortable with it is to talk to someone who knows you really well and who's been with you since maybe you decided this is what I want to do with my life, or you did like I did and you tried six different things before you finally figured it out. Talk to that person and say, I have to write a personal essay. When you think of me,
Mm.
what do you think of? And then you can take that, and that might make that discomfort of I'm talking about me a little bit less edgy for you. If you're comfortable. I'm not saying, and if you do that, do not ask your mother or your father or the person closest to you because they think you're perfect. Ask one of your friends who's honest with you.
That's great. I think this is a good opportunity to tackle a question that has come up more often, especially in years that last year and this year, and that has to do with use of AI in applications, which we know happens. I know teachers and professors are grappling with this in the classroom. We're now seeing it within scholarship applications. So I just want to share quickly the Institute and the National Press Club's policy on use of AI in any application materials. As a journalist and aspiring journalists, you know that your work needs to be your work. But we acknowledge that as AI develops and is more available and there are more use cases for it within journalism, it's just everywhere. So our guidance is that use of generative AI to draft your personal essays is strictly prohibited. If use of AI is suspected, your application will be disqualified. I think that's a pretty hard line in the sand for the journalists who are going to be reviewing these applications. However, we do know that newsrooms are experimenting with use of generative AI with the newsroom product itself, the stories that are being published, different graphics, things like that. So if you used AI transparently in the production of any of your work samples, you just need to include a short description of how you deployed those tools in your work. So personal essay, don't use AI. If you have used AI in the work samples that you're sharing, just make sure you note it for the judges so that they're aware and it's transparent. Um, let's see. I think the other things that you noted in our prep call had to do with the starting the essay. You mentioned already that don't start your essay with a definition, right? Like that's not a great lead for a story. It's not a great lead for an essay either. Erin, you mentioned starting with "My name is," and do you want to tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to back up to the AI a little because it's kind of a nice bridge. One of the biggest tells in my career so far that someone used AI, and I know all of you on here are going to know this is ridiculous. This person wrote a speech and delivered the speech, but what they turned in said, "Hi, my name is bracket, insert name here, bracket. I am going to talk about topic, insert topic here." And I thought, you didn't even try. And I am 99.7% sure no one on here is going to do that. I'll never be 100% sure. But even in the case of I'm sitting down, no AI tools, and I'm going to write this thing, don't start with your name, don't start with your school, don't start with where you're from, unless those things are directly relevant to the story you're going to tell. In that case, yeah, fine. We have had people, and I'm not even sure when this was, there was a student one time who did start their essay with, "My name is so and so," but it was an unusual name that got people to do like "Your name is what?" It was an object or something. And it was useful in that case.
And
But
it probably was used as a lead that
yeah,
tied into
yes.
meeting the prompt. Yeah.
Exactly. So if it meets the prompt, 100%. But we don't need your bio, we don't need your resume in the beginning of it. We need your story. Your resume, your grades, your name, your details, that's all in the application already. So this is a space where you can go beyond those demographic markers, those financial markers, those grade point average markers, especially if you are, I don't want to say uncomfortable with, but you're not I didn't have the best GPA in high school. I'm honestly still not sure how I finagled them into letting me out. Uh, but it was part of the fact that I was overextended. And so I could tell a story based on, look, my GPA might be at 2.9, but here's why. And so if it's relevant, that's one thing. But we have all that. We don't need to hear that as the meat of your essay.
Just to build on what you're saying about the other pieces of the application, the being available to the judges, so you don't necessarily have to replicate a lot. Something that's not available to the judges is deep knowledge of the journalism program or resources that you had available to you at your school. So the essay can be a great, we want to acknowledge that, not all journalism programs, high school or college are built the same or have the same funding, have the same teaching support, those types of resources. The essay can be a really good chance to articulate how you have done great journalism and are worth like that you deserve these scholarships. You can point out that you maybe didn't have any instructional support or you didn't have a student newspaper or broadcast outlet, but hey, you went and created your social media channel and this is how you did it. This is a way to show and not just tell in a resume the work that you've put behind jumpstarting your career.
We have had some impressive candidates who have had no structural support, no framework to work from, and they've been able to demonstrate, through something as simple as my Instagram has everybody in the school I go to follows it and everybody in the town. You don't have to have 100,000 followers. You really don't. It can be small, it can be mighty, and that's okay because we also recognize the industry changes. The industry has changed a lot since I worked in it. I've moved to the communications side, and um, I used to be lucky enough to go out to the simplest stories in the field with a camera person, a sound person, a driver, and me. So I got to do nothing but stand there and look pretty. But now that's not the case at all. It's even gone to the point of, the camera on your phone is better than a lot of the things we've worked with in a professional setting. And so we understand sometimes that your tools and your resources are not going to be structural, organized things. But it is up to you to demonstrate that you've done that in the absence of. So this is a good chance, like Beth said, to tell that story because, and this is a little bit of inside baseball, but we have judges from all walks of life, all walks of life. And sometimes they don't have that experience with social media being the powerful tool that it can be, even for your local stories, even for your own cultural hobby related stories. They may not have that framework. It doesn't make them bad judges. It means their experience is different. And so you need to tell them, you need to be able to explain to someone who has never seen social media journalism why what you have done and what you have put together with nothing but the $5 in your pocket and your iPhone is gonna it's big. It's a big deal because what you've done, the fact that you've done that, you have gone out and you've made your way, that's a huge deal, and yeah, you kind of do have to prove it to us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, without the context, we aren't always sure what impact that might have had, and it might have been a big impact.
I'll just add on to that. That is one thing, there is a large gap between the resources that some schools have, that other schools have, especially when it comes to things such as newspapers, anything outside the classroom. So it is very beneficial in your application to put in, whether that's somewhere in your resume, whether that's somewhere in your personal statement, put kind of a picture of the resources that were at your school that you were faced with. If you're from a small town, there may not be, like a large newspaper nearby, but if you are, have the one internship at the one like newspaper in your town, just kind of paint that picture of, the resources that were at your hands, because that does give the judges like a good picture of the retrospect to where that falls with what you had available to you.
I
Yeah, and I
also
think that, oh, go ahead.
I also don't want it to sound like you have to have reinvented the wheel or invented the wheel from scratch either, because, yes, some students have started a paper or a TV station at their school. They've been like, we don't have it, I'm going to make it happen. You don't even have to have gone that far. So don't think that that disqualifies you if you were at a school where these opportunities never existed and your your cut of the industry at this point is very small. It might be small, but very, very powerful. So I don't want anyone to be intimidated out of applying because they think, oh, well, I mean, I never really started anything. I never did an internship at a real paper. Even in my small town, we don't have a small paper, a paper anymore in my small town. That could be your reality, and that's okay. That does not disqualify you from consideration for these awards
I
because
do,
we
I
want
do,
you in the industry.
I know we're gonna transition to work samples here now, but before we do, I think this might be a good bridge, is that, these scholarships, the intention behind these scholarships is to recognize and support students who have a real interest in journalism as a career, and who want to pursue journalism within the skills and standards of our industry. So I think, again, as you're thinking about how you describe your interest and the work that you've done so far, and telling great stories and impacting your community, that your work samples need to also reflect journalistic integrity. And I think we can probably get into that a little bit with the work samples now, which are a next huge piece of the puzzle, the application puzzle. So especially because, as Erin and Caitlin have pointed out, resources are different. Um, Access and interest are different, and formats are different. So many different formats exist within today's information landscape that student journalists today know how to do so many different things. Audio and video is not just our traditional broadcast outlets anymore. It's social media journalism, as you've discussed. It's graphic design and building out different ways for people to consume information. So I think maybe we just start with a general question, Caitlin and Erin. How can aspiring journalists and current journalists best showcase their variety of work, um, when they're thinking about selection of their work samples?
I can go first. I think the best for me personally is if you have, it's not even so much different formats, it's just different topics. So like if you have like a variety of things you've covered or a variety of different styles, I think that the judges always react well to that because it does show like a greater breadth of what you have done in your experience. But also, and that's also a good way to go with if you haven't had, ability to do a bunch of different formats, which isn't necessary at all. We've had people win scholarships that have only written for their high school paper or only done broadcast, especially for the broadcast specific one. But I know we've had like broadcast winners win the diversity scholarship. It really just covers different things. I think the biggest thing for me is if it's something that where I think also a question somebody asked about multiple writers, if it is something such as a broadcast show that you produced or something that you wrote with other people, to just also attach just kind of like a summary of what contributions you had to the work. That's the biggest thing is that we really just want to see what you've done and your skill set and just showcase the amazing things that you've done. And the greatest way to show that is like, yeah, here's this amazing product, and I really want to show you, but here's what I specifically attributed to it, especially if it was off-screen, talent, when it comes to broadcast, which is like, very necessary in in that business. That they make the wheels turn. But just kind of showing how you made this, what you contributed to make this amazing end product.
So
And
three kind of things that tie together with what Caitlin was saying, what Jonathan's asking in the chat, and then a couple things I was thinking about. I'll start with your question, Jonathan. Is it better to show range or expertise on a single thing? You say you freelanced over a handful of topics. That's not going to be weighed. One is not better than the other. In that case, what you can demonstrate from freelancing with multiple topics, and I'm assuming potentially multiple outlets, is your ability to work with the topic, the story, the outlet, the editors, the whole shebang to make this thing come to life and to get it out there. And to tie to that, we understand as judges that if you have something published, editors have had their fingers in it. So two things to think about here. If you're a copy editor, if you are on that side of things, you can apply for these things. You can make that case for yourself. You can say, my work is to make sure this is polished for the audience and is, what it needs to be to put it out there. So that's okay. Also, being able to work with an editor as a writer, as a producer, as anyone on camera talent, that's a key piece of being in this industry. And it's a key piece of demonstrating to us that that's an important part of it. So don't shy away from, for instance, saying this piece was published in XYZ, putting it out there, and then this other piece was published in ABC, which is in a completely different type of outlet. If you have that capability, if you don't, that's okay too. It doesn't have to be these big, I wrote for Allure, I wrote for, you know, Sports Illustrated. It doesn't have to be range like that. It also doesn't have to be, I can do all the things. You probably specialize to an extent. And we do get some submissions, which are very cool, from photojournalists, from editors, from people, who work behind the camera, who creating the visuals for stuff is their main passion. Graphic designers, people who build infographics, all of these things, interactive elements, which have become kind of a weird area, for better or worse. There are people who know how to do this stuff. There are data journalists, there are science journalists, there are people who deal with niche pieces, and you may want to be one of those people. All of those things count. But when you submit that, you probably need to explain, well, you definitely need to explain what role you played. What happens with a lot of the photojournalism entries is they're beautiful photos, but we don't have the context. So provide the context, provide what the story was, what the assignment might have been, what you did, how you brought that photo to life. Ditto the graphic design, the infographics, the data visualization, etc. And interviewing skills, which sometimes get pushed aside, especially if you're interviewing but you're not on camera. We've seen these. We know what this looks like. You You have your people, your subjects, and they're on camera, but you are not. You had to get them to tell that story. You had to get them there. So that's an important part of it. Explain that to us. Don't feel like you can't explain.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up here and get to some specific questions we have in the chat and the Q&A. We have somebody who's asked if, like, in terms for the West Vernon Scholarship, are you only looking for broadcast samples for that specific scholarship or a mix of print and broadcast? And I would say we are looking for broadcast samples for that specific broadcast scholarship opportunity. I also want to go back to, again, writing and submitting an application that meets the intent of the scholarship. So I think about the Passon Sports Writing Scholarship. In that, the judges will be looking for sports writing. So submitting broadcast samples, those will not be considered because the intention and the requirement for that is going to be very important in whether a submission is considered. I see another question here. I want to speak to the multiple, sorry, if you have work samples that have multiple writers or multiple participants, just to really underscore, like just from a practical standpoint, when you submit those URLs on the application, there is an option to also submit a PDF or other things. Go ahead and write up a little paragraph about how you contributed to that particular piece, whether it is in a production standpoint or if you were one of 3 reporters and you handled X, Y, and Z sourcing. Make sure that you are being clear. And we have methods within the application for you to include an explanation. You might be tempted to just say, oh, they'll figure it out. Don't assume that. Make sure you include that description because it can mean the difference between becoming a finalist and a recipient pretty easily.
I have an
And then,
example of that actually happening
sure.
last year, just a quick one actually. It was a data journalist, and the article itself, the story wasn't very strong, but their role, the visualization they put in there was incredible. But it took us going through multiple different pathways to figure out that was their contribution and to be able to judge that correctly. Because if we had been judging it on the article itself, no way. And that did a disservice to the applicant who was very good at bringing numbers to life in a way that was ahead of where they were in their career.
Great, thank you, Erin. And then I also want to touch on James's question about journalism being a lot of different things. And then Erin's comment about this being, advocacy journalism. I want to just remind everyone the intention behind these National Press Club scholarships is to honor work and individuals who are interested in upholding the skills and standards outlined for our profession. And while that sometimes applies to opinion journalism, I think that most opinion journalism that is submitted as work samples is not held to the same regard in the selection process as traditional reporting. I think the advocacy and opinion turns into as Erin mentioned in her response in the chat, a little bit of a gray area. But I would suggest strongly that as you're considering your work samples, even if a lot of your work has been in the advocacy space, that the intention of these awards is to make sure that we're recognizing the work that upholds skills and standards. So maybe we just leave it at that. And if you have individual questions about whether something would be crossing a line too far into advocacy, rather than fair and balanced journalism, you can reach out to us at npcscholarships@press.org, and we can try to help you with some specific questions. A couple of other just logistical things for you to be paying attention to, again, practical matters. You need to make sure that any work samples that you submit are accessible to the judges and not behind a paywall or some kind of other login that they would need to see the work. As we mentioned earlier, we are expecting upwards of 400, 500 applications across these opportunities, and that's a lot to dig through. If your work is not accessible to the judges, or if a link is broken, anything like that, the work will be disqualified. We are not going to reach out to try to find a correct link. So do double check everything to make sure that those links are working. We have a workaround for you if there is a paywall. You can upload a PDF, a Word document, screenshots to help you show off your work. Um,
One thing you don't want to do in that case, the PDF, the screenshot, the Word document, that's fine, but don't copy and paste the text into a Word document and just give it to us like that unless it actually demonstrates that it was written somewhere, because again, these are things we want to see that you've done, and you're not doing yourself any favors by removing it from, if it's published work, that's good for us to know. And if you put it in a Word document, just plain text, it just looks like you wrote it to apply. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying don't de-emphasize your best work because of a format thing. Try to keep it connected in some way to show that it was published if that's an important part of the story.
yeah. And just to reemphasize with these scholarship applications is that the quality, not the quantity of your work is what matters. So to Jonathan's question about showing range or expertise, um, I would build on what Erin and Caitlin said earlier that, if you are applying for a specific scholarship that is calling for showcasing your work in sports writing or in broadcast, or if you are applying for the Feldman graduate studies opportunity, if you're a practicing journalist and you've developed expertise on a beat and you're applying for graduate school, let's showcase that expertise on the beat. You don't necessarily have to show a wide variety there. So just consider the opportunity and then tailor your work samples and your essay to best demonstrate that you are the candidate to receive that award. Um, we had another question that came up, and I just want to make sure we address it. And this was from I think Padma earlier, asked if you can apply for multiple scholarships if you're eligible for multiple scholarships. You absolutely can, but this gets into the specificity of and the tailoring of your application to make sure that it works for the recognition that you're looking for the opportunity. Let's see here. Um, let's see. Okay, so I do know that we have a number of, especially with two high school opportunities open to incoming college freshmen. Um, Erin and Caitlin, what would you suggest or how can you encourage those aspiring journalists who are just starting out and don't necessarily have a big portfolio to draw from? If, let's say they haven't been published, they don't have an outlet. What are some of the things that they could consider submitting that would showcase the journalism skills and standards we're trying to honor?
Caitlin, you go first.
Yeah, if they haven't been published, and their own journalism skills, I know in the past we've seen blogs. So, just even if nobody's reading it, it shows, that they went out and like I mean, we've seen very well researched like blog entries that they've posted. I'm trying to I mean, we've seen like different videos online that they've made similar to self-posting, but like Erin said, I know like social media is a much bigger thing, and if you have a voice that people in your community pay attention to, we've seen people that I think has been a growing trend we've seen, especially as there are schools and unfortunately journalism programs are one of the first that get cut, and the last that get brought back. But yeah, I think just kind of taking advantage of just free and like free access to social media and blogs and things that you can do on your own is what we've seen a lot. I know we've also seen some stuff for like school projects. I believe we've had a few from different like well done school projects just to show potential and just skill that they have, and just kind of, and this kind of goes back to outlining the resources that you have in your community and at your school and how you've responded to that and still manage to develop this desire to go into journalism, which at this point, especially not having resources, is very admirable, and just kind of painting that picture and telling that story for the judges.
So, a couple small things to add to that, because yes, I agree with Caitlin. I generally do agree with Caitlin. There was an applicant a few years ago who ended up winning one of the scholarships, and she had zero published stuff. She had a YouTube that she had done on her own because it was something she wanted to do. I mean, she had a whole YouTube channel um, dedicated to covering like high school sports. There was no outlet at her high school. This had zero support from the school she was going to. It was just something she did. And she was so strong in her skills because she had taken the time to say, I don't care if my dad's the only person who watches this. I'm going to make it good. And she did, and ended up winning one of the scholarships because she showed as a high school student that resourcefulness, that desire, that passion, that commitment, and then the skill. So that can be done. You can win it by not having anything real by definition of whoever decides what's real, because that was very real. I mean, the production value, the fact that this student had no institutional backing and walked up to strangers and said, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you," and was able to get the interviews she needed. And then kind of a caveat on the school assignment, school project thing. Um, it can be good, but it also can hurt you depending on what you submit. So don't send us essays for your history class. Don't send us where your journalism teacher said, write an essay about what journalism is. And it's like, I need 500 words. And that's not what we want. We don't want your class assignments traditionally. We want journalism related work you might have done in class. So it still has to meet that criteria of being, of exercising journalism skills, but it does not have to have seen the light of day necessarily.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think what we can do in our the FAQ that we'll share on the tip sheet is share some examples of those. And Erin, I'm so glad that you brought up, I think that was Anissa who had the fabulous
Christina,
sports. Christina. Okay, sorry. We've had so
I
many
fought for
fantastic,
her.
yes, so many really talented young aspiring journalists who have created their own space, but they are practicing those skills and demonstrating the journalism skills that separate it from being a channel that is focused on opinion, focused in on storytelling that doesn't involve reporting. So these are great examples that we'll make sure we include in our tip sheet. I'm mindful of the time, so I just want to make sure we get through a couple more things related to the last big piece and something that often can be kind of last minute asks, and that's the letters of recommendation that are required. Each application requires 3 letters of recommendation for the applicant. You have read hundreds and hundreds, maybe probably, I know for a fact, thousands of letters of recommendation in your time reviewing applications. So what are you looking for when you are, perusing these? And we can maybe just spend a few minutes here before we get to the
So,
additional questions we have.
as someone who has not just read a bunch of them, but has been asked to write them a lot, please don't ask these people when you need it in 48 hours. You might think your professors and teachers live at school, but they don't. So when you ask 48 hours in advance, you're not giving them enough time to tell your story. You're not giving them enough time to say, I enjoyed working with the student and here's why. And you're not going to get the best recommendation from that. Also ask people who do know you. Don't just randomly ask your basketball coach because I don't know. It might not be the right person. That person might know you really, really well. That person might be able to talk about you as a basketball player, but may not know anything about the kind of parts of your character or your skill that would make you a good journalist. They might be a good choice. You have to make that call on your own. When students ask me to write letters, I need the information ahead of time. I need you to send me, this is for this scholarship. This is the due date. This is, what I need, why I'm applying to it. Make sure you own that narrative before you even ask them to write the letter, because it's so much easier for us as professors and then us as judges to see you come to life through someone else's eyes if we were seeing you come to life through someone else's eyes, not just geez, here's my form letter. I'm just going to plug in the student's name and send it. We do get a lot of those. And I mean, that's not your fault that that's the way the professor or teacher approaches it, but it is your responsibility to try to avoid that as best you can by choosing your recommenders well and communicating with them clearly and as early as possible.
Yeah, and similarly, I agree with all of that, and that's definitely important. I will just add to make sure that it's very tempting to get a recommender that has like the highest title of importance, but just make sure you get somebody that like actually knows you, and can talk about that. And it doesn't have to be because we're not looking for titles with recommendations. We're looking, like Erin said, for people that can actually like show us you and your potential and why you'd be a great journalist, like through their eyes. But yeah, just somebody that, can actually like attest to working with you and actually knows you.
Yeah, I
Which,
think that,
yeah.
yeah, to build on what you're saying and to answer Padma's question, great question. Padma has in the chat, should all three recommenders know me specifically in a journalism capacity? I know a lot of people who know me in journalism capacity, but there are some mentors that don't necessarily work with me journalistically, but definitely know me a lot better. And just to kind of like wrap up what you were saying, Caitlin and Aaron, to get to Padma's question, I also have written, I think, probably thousands of reference letters and also have read many, many more. I think the best letters, just again to underscore this, are people who know, number one, your journalistic work, right? You need at least one recommender who can speak to that. People who can speak about your work ethic, and maybe that's an employer if you have a part-time job while you're going to school. People who can say that you show up and you do the thing you say you're going to do. That's a really important part of anybody's life, but also for journalists. And who can talk about your passion. And maybe that is a basketball coach who knows you're also juggling working at the student newspaper and you're also a straight A student who can kind of connect the dots on those things. So, it all comes down to people who know you, and who are not your family. Please don't ask your family members to
Please don't ask your roommate or best friend
yes,
either, because I
yeah.
get those sometimes.
Yes. But again, just to reiterate what they've said, you want to ask early, be specific about the opportunity. The more time you give your recommender could mean a much better letter. I know that for a fact with the asks that I've had. I know Aaron has too. And then if you're a high school or if you're in high school and you're asking a counselor or teacher, they do have form letters. They're being asked by everybody in the school to write letters of recommendation. So please try to get them to at least reflect in the letter the opportunity. We get so many letters that are addressed to other organizations for other awards that are clearly just, the student asked one time and didn't want to ask again to have an update. Don't be afraid to ask for that update because it can make a difference.
So that
Um,
actually, just a quick thing on that. I had a student a couple of years ago who's like, I'm applying to 5 different things, and I really, really want you as my recommender. And I know that's a lot of work. And I was like, don't worry. I have a letter that does the basics and then fills in the paragraph. Tell me what you need me to highlight about you, about each one of those things, and I'm happy to plug that paragraph in. So there is going to be a hybrid, but make sure they address it to us at least, and make sure they have that piece in there. Yeah, definitely.
and then I think we can get to, I want to make sure we get to other questions too. But one other quick note, and I don't think we need to ask any question about that, but I just want to share. We get some inquiries about how to describe your financial need, which is a short section of the application. And this can be a hard thing to do. But what we're asking you to do with that is just give your best estimate on how you plan to pay for school. So this could be a percentage like, oh, I expect to have 40% paid using scholarships that I'm already aware of. I anticipate this percentage for loans. I'm going to have a part-time job. This will be an out of pocket, or my parents are going to help with this. Just an estimate on kind of how you anticipate paying for your education. That can be very helpful and is sometimes comes down to the wire. It's not the top consideration of judges based on what Aaron and Caitlin and other judges have said, but it is a factor in the finalist stages. Okay, so we have a couple of questions I want to make sure we get to before we wrap up. Um, let's see. Are you okay? So this has to do with the letter of recommendations. Are you still fine with letters of recommendation that don't specifically address the National Press Club?
I
I don't
think,
I'm,
want
s-
to go
yeah,
ahead,
I
Caitlin.
said, I think, it's fine if it doesn't in detail say, the press club and give like a breakdown of the award. I think the biggest thing is reading that it's like very clearly not written for like another organization. I do understand, when you do get letters and like I haven't written academic letters. I've only written for other organizations, but I think the biggest, you're kind of at the mercy of the recommender. I think the biggest thing is that it's just like talking about you and like journalism as a whole, and that if it's like if they'll only give you a generic letter about yourself, I think that's fine. It's just as long as it's not clearly just being reused with the goal of another scholarship or
Yeah,
award.
and I think too, it's from the side of the recommender, from the side of the person writing 3, 4 dozen of these every month or so sometimes, they, if they know you well enough for you to ask them, they can probably tell enough of a story that could be sent to anywhere. You know, even if it's not directly about your journalism, even if this is your recommender who talks about your work ethic, or this is your recommender who talks about you as a leader in, you know, a youth group or some other space, or your basketball coach who talks about you coming from the bench to be a star, but you know, that person is probably going to talk about you from that point of view, no matter what the scholarship is. So just think if you do have one of them, that the others maybe should be journalism related. So that's, it's not that it's not okay to have that kind of generic letter that talks about you as this, but think about what the other ones are as companions to it.
Yeah, they fit together. And I think that's the important part. And I know we have a couple more questions, but I know other people need to hop off right at the hour. Um, I think what we're hearing overall is that each of these pieces fits together to tell your story. And it's the three reference letters coming together to describe how people see you and how people see your work ethic and your journalistic ability. It's your personal essay telling the judges your why and why now you're the right fit, along with your resume that shows your background, along with your transcript that shows your GPA. All of these things work together. Some are weighted a little bit more heavily, as Erin and Caitlin have said. Like the personal essay and the work samples really are the bulk of the work there, and can get you from applicant to finalist. And then the other things come together when you're in the finalist stage. Um, what the biggest takeaway is, I hope that everybody gets from this, is that you really know the unique scholarship that you're applying for and then self-edit to ensure that your application meets those requirements, and does it in a quality way. You know, it's following the specific processes. None of these are one size fits all. And it's really quality over quantity, is going to get you further in the long run. And all of that takes time and focus. And by spending time today with this, with Erin and Caitlin, and myself and with the Institute and Club, you are getting a leg up on the competition by hearing directly from Erin and Caitlin. We've covered a lot. And again, it's 11:58, at least here in DC. So I want to just make sure I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer for folks who can't stay on, because we still have a couple of questions outstanding. But if you have to jump, thank you for being here. We're going to send you a survey. Well, again, we'll send some tips as well, to help you along. But let's get to some other questions. Erin and Caitlin, are you okay to hang out for a couple more
Yeah,
minutes?
but I wanted to say something that might help people is to think of,
Sure.
has anybody ever asked you to, you know, you write something and they go, so what? You're answering the so what, because there are hundreds of applicants that you're going up against. So what? Why you? Everybody here's the same. Why you?
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of other questions that we've had come in. And again, if you would like to stay and ask some specific questions to your circumstance, you're welcome to. We have a question from Padma who asks, can you talk more about what you're looking for from the Zimmerman Scholarship applicants, distinct from the Julie Shu Scholarship applicants? And I think I'm happy to get started with that by saying that, in just the description alone, the Julie Shu applicants, or sorry, that application process, that award is focused on how the applicant is going to contribute to diversity in U.S. media, where the Zimmerman application is that award is intended to support anyone who's interested in journalism as a profession, and can show that they have a true interest in it. So those are, kind of the top lines. But Erin, Caitlin, what are the distinctions for you when you're looking at those
Sure. Uh,
opportunities?
So I will say the one big thing is, and this sounds a little bit more negative than I mean it to, but your reason for being eligible for SHU is not your reason for being eligible for Zimmerman. That isn't necessarily going to give you the leg up for Zimmerman in the same way. It might. Your work might be stellar and you might be the person who is a better fit for Zimmerman. But when you are talking about how you're bringing diversity to the field, that's SHU. when you're talking about how you're bringing your skills and your voice and your own passion, and I hate that word, and direction and commitment to journalism, independent of anything else, that's Zimmerman. So I'm not saying don't bring it in your diversity. We do care about that, but that is better suited to Shu, whereas Zimmerman's more open to, I may not have an underrepresented element to my background, but I'm really good at this thing, and let me show you how. And so that's the big difference, I would say.
Excellent. Um, and then we have another question from, okay, Caitlin, thanks so much. I appreciate you being here. We all appreciate you. Have a great day.